Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel and welcome to our cozy little corner of the internet. I'm AP Calculus and today I'm reading the entirety of chapter 7 of Double Dare by ToadlilyAUs. Here is the summary. Dare trails Shinso, prevents a robbery in a convenience store, and then takes on a new student. Hope you guys enjoyed this. Sorry for the absence, but hopefully I'm back on track now. See you guys in the fic. Chapter 7, Shoot Your Shot. Dare had a plan. The plan was to ask Midori to make him a plan. The lilac vigilante had a quirk, which would be difficult to counter, especially without knowledge on how it worked and what they could do with it. So today they would trail them to try and gather some information. Perhaps take some video on his phone, and if by day's end Dare hadn't figured out a way to talk to him themselves, then they would take what they knew to their partner for analysis. That's what partners are there for, after all. The thought warmed his heart a bit, knowing that there was someone who had his back. He tried not to think too hard about what happened to the last one. Zoo wasn't like them. This time would be different. The first piece of the puzzle came from the building he lived in. East Musatafu Foster and Adoption Center, according to the sign out the front. So, they were an orphan then. This doesn't surprise them much. Vigilantes often came with a tragic backstory attached. What did surprise him was the total and complete lack of medical attention the kid had apparently received after they came home with what was clearly a broken nose. Once again, crawling out of the window to the fire escape, he spotted no splint, no bandages. It didn't even look like it had been iced. If Dara had to hazard a guess, it looked like they had attempted to reset the nose himself and then just went to bed. All other aftercare simply forgotten. It didn't bode well. Best case scenario, those in charge were unaware of his injury because he had hid in his room all day. But even then, that meant they went a full 24 hours without doing a welfare check on him. When benevolent neglect is the best case scenario, it doesn't paint the best picture. Dare made mental note to do some research on this place tomorrow. The second piece of the puzzle came after they stopped their first mugging for the night. It went pretty similar to the first incident Dara had seen them in. The kid ran in, made a bored-sounding remark, the robber told him to get lost, and then activated his quirk and sent the guy packing. What was interesting about it was what happened afterwards with the victim. You alright, sir? He asked the nervous salaryman, but the salaryman didn't respond, simply threw money at his face and started running. The kid crouched down to gather the money before it could be blown away in the wind, and yelled after the man as he fled. Wait, I'm not trying to rob you, come back! But it was pointless. He was already long gone by the time he had finished gathering all the cash. He stared down at the bills and the coins in his fists, then up and down the street, looking for any sign of the salaryman had gone. The kid chewed on his bottom lip, a guilty look on his face, before slipping the money into his left pocket. Dare couldn't help but notice he did not put the money in his wallet, nor did he spend it when he went to the 7-Eleven for coffee an hour later. He did, however, give half of it to a homeless woman who asked for a bus fare, and then slipped the rest into a donation box in front of a children's hospital. This told Dare everything he needed to know to decide that he liked this kid. He clearly had it rough, and seemed to be lacking some relatively basic things for a kid his age, like a cell phone or shoes without holes in them. No one would have judged him for keeping the money for himself. Hell, Dare would have. He would have considered it cosmic karma payment for services rendered. But this kid didn't, and that spoke volumes of his character and his motivations. He reminded Dare of Zoo, and the desire to do good for goodness sake. Unfortunately, they only had time to gather one more piece of information on them before circumstances demanded he must make himself known. They both heard the shouting at the same time. Two men inside a convenience store shouting at the teller to empty the register. Even through the window, it was easy to see they both had guns. The kid hesitated, the physical human equivalent to buffering, he seemed to consider his odds. Dare slid down the side of the building he was perched on, pleading inside his head the whole way down. Don't do it, kid. Don't even think about it. Those are guns, and you're not bulletproof. Thankfully, the kid wasn't an idiot. He turned around to run towards the nearest payphone, just as Darrow turned the corner and met the kid's eyes. For a second, they stood there maintaining eye contact. Darrow saw a flash of recognition, followed by fear in the kid's eyes. He spoke before the kid had a chance to do so himself. It's alright, I can handle them. I'm bulletproof. It was an oversimplification of the truth, but he wasn't technically bulletproof, but the bullets just wouldn't kill him. But this was not the right time to get into the difference between the two. Do me a favor. Wait here until you hear the shooting stop. And then please call the cops and an ambulance. The kid's head tilted to the side, their face scrunching confusion. Why do you need an ambulance if they can't hurt you? Dare smirked, one hand clamped on the kid's shoulder in reassurance. It's not for me. He gave a two-fingered point to the direction of the robbers. It's for them. And then he cracked his neck and ran off towards the action. Step 1. Getting the robbers' undivided attention focused on him and not on the teller. Best method of getting attention fast? Breaking a window. Dare didn't bother with the door. He simply dove through the glass, landing in a roll on the broken glass. The shock and the sound did exactly what he knew it would, and before he even finished his roll, the bullets were already flying in his direction. He heard the teller yell as they dove down behind the counter. Good. Good. As long as they stayed down, they should be safe. Dare felt one bullet graze his shoulder as another one purchased into his calf. They hissed through their teeth at the pain, but powered through as they charged the first assailant. It was only muscle. It would be replaced in a few minutes. He leapt up, ignoring the incoming shots, one leg swinging up over the man's shoulder as the other wrapped around his chest. The force knocked them both back into the candy display in front of the counter. The leg slung over the shoulder, made a crunching sound as it crashed into the shelves, but there was no time to worry about that now. The guy's partner had already begun aiming towards Dare's back. Dare swung backwards from the man below him, resulting in the second assailant accidentally shooting his partner in the shoulder. Shit! The robber yelled in frustration and anger. A vengeful rage filled his resolve, and now his injured partner nursed his injuries. Dare took advantage of the temporary confusion to spot the gun of the first man had accidentally dropped on the ground. Looking back up at the still standing attacker, Dare knew he and the robber knew exactly where this was headed. Dare took another shot to the left arm as he dove for the gun. A quick somersault and a sliding spin later, Dare was knelt on one knee, his gun leveled at the man's legs. He wouldn't be running away without his kneecaps. Meanwhile, the angry figure loomed over him, his own gun pressed into Dare's forehead, but for what would be a fatal blow. Neither figure pulled the trigger. Drop the fucking gun! Drop it, or I swear I'll blow your fucking brains out. I'd rather you didn't. Dare kept his voice and weapon stable, trying to exert dominance despite his lack of high ground. I don't give a shit what you want. Drop the goddamn gun. Dare considered his options. He could simply shoot the guy's kneecaps, and accept the headshot in retaliation, but he would have 3.5 witnesses to come back to him coming back from a fatal wound later on. Not to mention the security footage. He could clear the footage when he wakes up, but he'll clear the footage when he wakes up. He would need to do that either way, but that was only half of the problem. The kid outside could only help wipe their memories, but would he agree to do that? Surely he wouldn't be willing to wipe his own mind. He would need to play it safe and avoid any obviously fatal wounds. Time to use his acting skills. With a defeated sigh, he slowly lowered his gun, dropping it on the ground and sliding it across the room out of either one of their reaches. Then raised both hands in surrender. The man did not lower his own weapon. "That's what I fucking thought, punk," he shouted before turning his head back over his shoulder to check on his partner. That was all the opening Dare needed. Muscle memory from hours upon hours of being forced to practice this move took over. In the blink of an eye, Dare's right hand grabbed the backside of the man's wrist, deflecting the gun as he simultaneously reached for the area just above the man's elbow with his left. The man fired a futile shot over Dare's shoulder as Dare quickly spun, continuing to pull the man's arm down and away from him at an angle. As the man clattered to the ground, Dare quickly twisted his arm behind him. If he tried to fire his weapon now, he would only be shooting himself in the back. Dare knelt down above him, snapping the robber's wrist to get him to drop the gun once and for all. He wanted to slide the gun across the room as well, but from the corner of his eye, he saw the first man slowly moving in their direction to try and help its partner. Time for acting lessons part 2. He grabbed the gun, using his other hand to keep his body weight to keep the other man held beneath him, and swung the weapon towards the crawling man's face. "Stand down," he said with an even voice. He did not turn to face him, only pointed the gun in his direction to show he knew where he was. The robber stopped crawling, but he did not sit back down or move away. So, with a bit more force behind his words, Dare repeated themselves. "I said, stand down." To fully drive his point home, he cocked the gun to show he was ready to shoot if he needed to, and then, only then, he flicked his gaze over his shoulder to make eye contact with his target. It had the desired effect. The man flopped backwards and scooted away. Dare put the safety back on and tucked the gun in his waistband. A minute later, he had both attackers secured with zip ties around their wrists and ankles. He found the teller sobbing behind the counter in the fetal position. She was clearly deeply distressed, scrambling on the ground away from Dare as he approached, but seemed otherwise unharmed. So instead of addressing her, he simply entered the necessary codes into the system to delete all the footage of tonight. He made eye contact with the hysterical young teller on the ground. She was terrified, not just of the attackers, but of Dare as well. As much as they hated scaring people, using their fear of him as a means of securing their silence was often the easiest and most effective. So he slowly crouched in front of them, and held one finger up to the woman's lips as well as his own. "Shh," he hissed at her in a mix of a whisper and a hiss, as he slid his own finger off the woman's lips, using the same hand to wipe away some of her tears before he stood back up and walked out of the store. Once he exited the building, he looked around for any sign of the kid, but it seems he made a run for it shortly after calling the cops. Sirens could be heard approaching in the distance, so Dare headed home as well. He had been shot a few times in the encounter, and the discomfort of regeneration was more than enough for one night's work. His only debate now was deciding to tell Zoo tomorrow. he still needed his help figuring out the other kid's quirk, so he would have an easier chance talking to him. But he would inevitably have questions about the fight that separated them tonight, and something told him he wouldn't be too pleased about that. Zoo worries about him, as pointless as the concern was, and it made him feel a little guilty every time he told him more about his painful injuries. But a whole new arm or leg would be difficult to handle, and the fact that the Vigilante Jr. was smart enough to avoid a gunfight was a necessary part of the analysis, so he would need to tell him at least that much. It had been a while since the last time he was shot. Guns were never particularly common in Japan, but now in the age of quirks, they were even rarer. Most big-time criminals prefer to use their own abilities as opposed to traceable bullets. Now, the only people still using them were low-level thugs with weak or non-offensive quirks, or the quirkless. One of the most common career paths for the quirkless was crime, between discrimination making it difficult to obtain legal employment and the lifetime of mistreatment affecting one's morals and priorities. It was clear why. But that was just for the lucky few that made it to adulthood at all. Hate crimes and suicide rates made it so less than 20% of those diagnosed quirkless see the age of 25, and those who do had a 60% chance of turning to a life of crime. It was a deeply unsettling set of statistics, one that made the miracle of Izuku's existence even more important to preserve in Dare's mind. He had the misfortune of being born without a quirk, but instead of allowing that to slow him down or sour him against the world, it made him more determined to help others. He didn't want to be a villain, he wanted to be a hero. And while he still had 10 years to go until he reached 25, Dare was determined to get him there. He wouldn't let his best friend become another statistic. The only number he wanted associated with his name was number 1, the first and the best. If anyone could do it, it was Zoo. Shinso Hitoshi crept back through the window with his heart still hammering tensely in his chest. That was a bit more action than he was prepared for. He was pretty sure that Technicolor Dreamcoat dude was shot at least twice, but he just kept moving. He said he was bulletproof, but the blood splatter he saw spraying after impact begged to differ. So did he just not feel pain? Whatever their deal was, this was the second time they had run into each other in as many nights. Was it a coincidence, or was he being followed? And for what purpose? If he was aiming to beat him up or kidnap him, then he had plenty of opportunity to do so. Instead, he seemed to be helping him. He had even willingly spoke to him on several occasions, which made no sense at all. He knew what his quirk was. He had asked him to use it on one dude last night. So, if he knew he was a monster, then why was he talking to him now? Did he just not know how his curse worked? That had to be it. He wouldn't put himself at risk if he knew. Hitoshi felt a bit guilty for not warning them, for hiding how easily it would be to hurt him. But at the same time, Hitoshi had a lifetime experience telling him the stranger would likely want to hurt him too. So he couldn't feel too bad about keeping himself his only line of defense to himself. He crept through the rundown building into the bathrooms so he could flush out the blood in his nose. Once that thoroughly unpleasant experience was over, he returned to his room for an even worse one. His room was once a supply closet that the warden threw an old mattress into. On the one hand, it was nice to have the only private room in the building. All the other kids slept in bunk beds with 2 to 3 kids in a room. But on the other hand, his private headquarters were not given to him out of respect or anything. It was to keep him isolated, to prevent him from corrupting the other children. Not that he would. He had never once used his quirk against any of the other kids, or the staff for that matter, but that didn't stop them from fearing him. On the upside to his closet room, on the other upside to his closet room was a small window leading to the fire escape. It wasn't the only window with access, but it was the only one behind a locked door. He spent more than a few nights locked in a tiny room by himself with an easily accessible way right in front of him before he decided to go for it. It was almost like they wanted him to run away. Maybe they did. It would be easier for them if he did. They could file a missing persons report to cover their own asses. The cops would spend 24 hours lazily looking for him, give up, and then they would be in the clear. But then what would he do? It was bad enough that the bulk of his government-funded monthly allowance was stolen by the warden. He was given exactly enough money not to starve to death, and that was it. But if he ran away, he would lose even that. He could get a job, maybe, but if he was a missing persons case, that would definitely come up during a background check. And would anyone even hire him? He could always make them hire him. No, he couldn't do that. He would just be proving everyone right. Tricking someone into hiring him was as bad as stealing from them. And Hitoshi was not a villain. He's not. He was going to be a hero. Nothing else to do, with nothing else to do but wait it out a few more years and he would age out of the system, and by then he would either be a hero or he'd be dead. He just had to grin and bear it a little while longer. Well, no, not actually grinning, but the sentiment was the same. Even if he was actually smiling, it's not like anyone would be able to see it from under the monstrosity glaring at him from his mattress. His muzzle. He hated the thing, hated it with a fiery, burning passion. But if the warden caught him not wearing it, there would be hell to pay. Besides, it did a good job of hiding his broken nose. Not that anyone would care if he was hurt, but they would have questions about where it came from. Questions he didn't want to answer, even if he was allowed to speak. So, it was for the best that he kept it hidden from them. With a deep breath and a grimace, he slid the muzzle back into place and tightened the straps just enough to be convincing. Then he laid back down on his mattress for yet another sleepless night. 3.5 years. That was all he had left before he would be free one way or another. Dara knew Izuku was a genius, but he still found ways to surprise him with just how insightful he was. He knew exactly what questions to ask to get to the bottom of their little mind wiper's problem. As if following a flowchart only he could see. Okay, so on the first night he took control of the first two people, but was unable to take control of the other three. Why? What was different about those encounters? Izuku tapped his chin with the knuckle of his index finger. Dare racked his own brain to try and find an answer, but Zu got to it before him. He said something to the mugger as well as the one victim before taking over, right? Yeah. And they all responded to him except that trio who just punched him instead. Dare thought about it for a second before answering. Yeah, actually. Do you think it has to do with something Kyoga's voice or something? No, I don't think that's it. He would have heard he would have heard their voice during the struggle, and he definitely heard those guys last night trying to giving their demands to the teller, and that wasn't enough to activate his quirk. It wasn't enough until they responded to him for him to be able to take over. Oh, so the response is what's needed to form a link then. That makes sense. Yeah, it makes it hard for you to know. It makes it hard for you too, holding a conversation though. You think non-verbal responses would work? Like if I brought a notepad along to write down my responses? Well, yeah, that could work, but Izuku trailed off, his eyes shot back and forth in his head, as if he was reading an invisible article in front of him. But, Dare asked curiously, I think, but I think if you want him to trust you, then he trailed off again. This time Daro could see the invisible text as well. He filled in the blanks for his partner. Then I need to prove that I trust him first. Izuku nodded sadly. It looked like he wanted to say more, but wasn't sure if he should. He didn't need to. Dare understood completely. A quirk like that, people are bound to be a little uneasy around, or defensive around him. He probably has been bending over backward. He probably has people bending over backwards just to avoid talking to him directly all the time. It must get lonely. Dara knew the feeling of everyone around you assuming the worst of you before even giving you a chance. Avoiding your gaze, crossing the street, running away. Yeah, Izuku confirmed his thought process nervously before adding in, I think if you can find a way to make it clear you know what his quirk is, and how it works, but you still want to talk to him anyway. We learned about confirmation bias and social mirroring one day in classes the other day. People are more likely to act in ways that confirm either what they think of themselves or what other people think of them. If your words and actions tell him that you think he'll do something right, he's far more likely to do so. If I trust him, he'll trust me. But if I go in there showing hesitation, he'll view it as a reason to be equally hesitant. Pretty much. But at the same time, if you come on too strongly, he is liable to think it's just a trap or that you're faking it for his benefit. So be friendly, but don't overdo it. How will I know if that what's too friendly? I guess try reading for him for clues. Nervous tics or defensive body language would be a sign to fall back a bit, but a relaxed body posture would mean lean in. Sorry, I'm not really sure. It's just a theory though. I can't make any promises it'll work. It'll work, Dare said with full confidence. He knew Zoo was right about this, both in the way the quirk worked and the best way to approach him. Trust was still something he was trying to get used to, but he trusted Zoo, and it worked out. And he was beginning to trust other people Zoo trusted, and none of them had betrayed him yet, so he could find a way to trust one more. Even if it meant saving another kid from possible harm, then he could do anything. Hitoshi was having a strange week. Encountering the same vigilante 2 nights in a row while on patrol was already unsettling enough. But if he had any remaining doubts that he was being followed before, they were completely dashed on the 3rd night. Hitoshi crawled out his bedroom window, onto the fire escape, just like he had done every night for the past month. But this night, a strange sense of being watched crept along the top of his head, and without really knowing why, he looked up. And there they were, the Calico Creeper in all their glory, sitting crisscross applesauce above him on the roof, and looking down at Hitoshi like he was a friend, who was late for a movie date or something. Hey there! The looming figures smiled with their head cocked to the side, one hand raised in a non-committal wave. Nice place. Hitoshi swallowed down the bitter bile threatening to rise in his throat. He was made. This guy knew where he lived. He knew what he did. He knew how he did it. He was fucked. Gritting his teeth in frustration, he turned on his heel and started to run down the fire escape. The other fighter followed him, though not in the way the stairs were designed. Instead of descending like a freaking normal person, the lunatic decided to hang on the side of the railing, let go, then cling to the railing just below long enough not to disrupt the momentum, before dropping himself again. Each clatter of the iron on the way down made his annoyance heighten all the more. The show-off was probably just here to tell him to back off, that it was their turf and that they had no intentions of sharing it with a villainous monster like him. They reached the ground floor just as Hitoshi descended the last flight of stairs. He expected them to stand in front of them or block their path, but instead they stood to the side, gesturing with their head for Hitoshi to join them, as if waiting for him before on a jog. The whole thing was overly friendly and confusing. He had no memory of agreeing to meeting up with anyone else for that matter. And yet here they were. Why? What was their angle? What do you want from me? Hitoshi whispered with as much don't fuck with me energy as he could muster without waking anyone inside. They shrugged before whispering back, I just wanted to talk to you. He squinted at them suspiciously, trying to read between the lines and discern their real purpose. About what? Figured you could use some backup on your patrol. This took him back a bit. He was expecting any number of threats to be slung at him, but not this. They wanted to team up with him? Why? The last person asking for Hitoshi's help with anything wanted him to use it on picking up chicks, then beat the shit out of him when he refused. Were they looking for a similar arrangement? I'm not looking to be anyone's lapdog. He interjected a bit of venom in his words as he shoved past them to begin walking down the alley. They quickly caught up, but didn't pass him, just maintained the same pose as they spoke. Good, I don't want you to be one. He glared at him from the sides of his eyes, waiting for the other shoe to drop, but it never did. What do you want then? Patches shrugged again, with a smile at the corner of their lips. It gets real lonely and dangerous on the job. As I'm sure you've noticed, an extra set of ears and eyes makes everything easier. Hitoshi scoffed. I'm not looking for a fucking sidekick either. Not a sidekick. I've already got a partner. Maybe I'm just looking for a friend. This was confusing on multiple fronts. Firstly, he'd never seen or heard of a partner, unless this guy had a twin and they had simply never been in the same spot at the same time. But that seemed unlikely. And secondly, if this guy was looking for a friend, why the fuck was he talking to him? I'm not exactly friendly. Are you sure about that? He stopped walking for a moment out of sheer confusion. What does that meant to mean? You're a smart kid. You must know I've been following you for a few days now. I've seen you walk people home, donate money that you could easily have kept for yourself, and stop to pet every stray cat you come across. You seem pretty friendly to me. While Hitoshi had known, logically, that they would have been following him, something about being point blank that this was the case made him feel entirely too seen. Then you've seen I've also hijacked people's mind and bend them to my will. You've only been following me for a few days. How do you know I haven't done bad things as well? Because you're a good person. He said it like it was obvious, like it was an indisputable fact. Hitoshi could do nothing but blink back with his bewilderment. But evidently, the stranger wasn't done with their little speech. I think you've got a lot of potential. You're clearly new to the whole vigilante thing, but with some proper training and support, I think you could do a lot of good for the world. Breathing got harder and harder as each sentence left their lips. After swallowing back some of the tightness in his throat, Hitoshi managed to choke out a few words. You do? Of course. And I would like to help you, if you would let me. Hey, how old are you? You in high school yet? At this point, he was too dazed to think about his responses. He went into autopilot. Not yet. I was hoping for a UA, but I doubt I'll get in. No kidding. Some friends of mine are going for the same thing. The heroics class, right? You don't strike me as a support or business type. Yeah. Well, in that case, we get together every other week to train. You should join us. With eyes as wide as saucers, he looked into the stranger's soul, searching their eyes for any hint of what the trick was, what they would want in return. I don't understand. Why would you want me there? Because it's easier to train all three of your future heroes at once than it would be to work out separate schedules for all of you future heroes. And I'm included in that? That's what you want, isn't it? Surely you're not joining the hero cause for kicks. The confusion was washed out at the sudden realization of guilt. Despite following him for the past few days, they must not fully comprehend his quirk. After a long pause to gather his resolve, he told him the truth. My quirk is mind control. Once someone responds to me, I can take over their mind and order them to do what I want or say. Order them what to do or say, whatever I want. Just by speaking to me, you're putting yourself in grave danger. Do you really think someone like me can be a hero with a quirk like that? I don't see why not. The quirk isn't what matters. It's what you do with it. If you do heroic deeds with heroic intentions, then you're a hero. So, as far as I'm concerned, you're already a hero. You just need a license to start getting paid for it. He chuckled for a bit at his joke. Hitoshi wanted to laugh with him, but the chuckle quickly dissolved into ugly sobs as he broke down and fell to his knees. The stranger knelt down next to him and waited for Hitoshi to regain his composure. Once they finally got a grip, they looked back up at them, expecting for them to have changed their mind in light of his moment of weakness, but instead gave him a reassuring smile and held out his hand to shake his. We're meeting up tomorrow at the park near Delgado Beach. At around 5, you think you can make it? He'll need to sneak out a lot earlier than he has ever attempted before, but it was doable. Yeah, I should be able to. He accepted the handshake, hesitant excitement bubbling under his skin. Glad to hear it. Hey, what's your name, kid? Shinzo Hitoshi. Well, nice to meet you. Nice to officially meet you. The name's Dare Dare. That's not a name. I know, but it's the only one I've got. They stood suddenly, offering their hand back to him, uh, offering a hand back to him off the ground. Hitoshi accepted it and stood at his side for a moment before both boys walked along the path of his usual patrol route, as if they had done it a million times before. If it was new, the idea of someone wanting him to be there, but he decided rather quick that it was a feeling he could get used to. Okay, guys, that was the end of chapter 7. Holy shit, that was a long one. Yeah, I wasn't expecting it to be that long. Like, I read it just before recording this, and holy fuck, I was not expecting it to be this long. But I'm like, hey, you guys have waited like 41 days for a fucking video. I should do at least do this and fucking give you a full chapter. So, anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed it. Chapter 8 is called Then There Were Three, where the summary is Shinzo meets Midoriya and Kaminari. Dare's new gear is finished, and Shinzo joins the fight. Hope you guys enjoy it, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye!